Welcome to episode 25 of the Cycling Europe podcast. My name is Andrew P. Sykes. In this episode of the podcast, we're swapping Europe for North America. A few weeks ago, I was chatting to a friend and he told me about a YouTube channel that he'd been watching which was devoted to long-distance cycling, mainly in the Americas. When I came home, I looked up the channel and was immediately engrossed. It's called Duzer TV, that's Duzer TV, and it's run by Ryan Van Duzer, a 40-something adventure cyclist based in Boulder, Colorado, on the very eastern edge of the Rocky Mountains. His most recent series of films recounts his 2020 cycle along the Great Divide Trail from the Canadian border to Mexico, but his videos tell the many stories of his many adventures over more than 10 years in America and beyond. The man is infectiously enthusiastic, and to a reserved British person, he can take some getting used to, but he quickly grew on me. I tweeted this thought and he responded saying, "That's what my mom said too." I invited him onto the podcast and a few days ago I recorded the chat you're about to hear. I started by asking Ryan to introduce himself.
Yeah, my name is Ryan Van Duzer. I'm born and raised in Boulder, Colorado, and I love riding bikes. I've never had a car in my life. I ride a bike everywhere for everything from grocery shopping to going on dates to touring the world on two wheels. And my goal is to inspire people to ride their bikes more, especially in the United States where it's such a big car culture. I would like to change that a little bit. And I do this through my YouTube channel. I make a lot of video content aimed at inspiring people, and that's essentially what I do.
Yeah, and that's the reason why I know about you. I was chatting to a friend a couple of weeks ago, and he said, "Oh, have you heard of Ryan Van Duzer? And have you seen his YouTube video channels?" And I said, "No, I hadn't." So I went online, I found you, and they are excellent. They're really entertaining. And if you want to find out about cycling predominantly in the Americas, then they're a good place to start. What's your cycle touring style? How would you, for somebody who's never actually seen you or seen any of your videos, what kind of cyclist are you?
I like doing a little bit of everything. You know, I live in the Rocky Mountains, so I really love mountain biking. I love off-road, but I've done all sorts of touring on pavement as well. But my style is just to have as much fun as possible, and I really love meeting the locals everywhere I go. I think it's one of the best ways to get to know a place is on two wheels. And my very first big bike tour, I rode from Honduras to Colorado, about, I guess, 3,000 miles. And the best part about it was meeting all these wonderful people in tiny villages along the way.
Yeah, and they are an important feature of your videos. People crop up all the time, and you're talking to them, and you're engaging with them, and they're a very important part of what you do.
Absolutely, and it just feeds my soul on a personal level. Even if there weren't cameras there, and if I wasn't sharing these adventures with the world, I personally just love connecting with people when I travel. It makes me happy, and it makes the world feel smaller and friendlier.
So what motivated you originally to start the YouTube channel and start making the videos? Because I looked the other day, and your oldest video dates back, I think it's about 10 years ago.
Yeah, I have some really old stuff. So I got a degree in broadcast journalism, and that essentially teaches you how to be like a local news reporter. And I didn't really want to do that. I wanted to share happy news, inspiring news. And I just started documenting all of my travels. And it wasn't always on a bike, but just any type of travel. And I loved sharing those stories with the world. I mean, I love a lot of, travel programming on TV. And it was always my chance to travel when I wasn't traveling. I could watch, these 30-minute shows and transport myself somewhere. And I really wanted to do that with my own channel. And I started, I guess the first time I ever documented a bike ride was in 2005 when I rode my bike from Honduras to Colorado. And from that moment on, I've been documenting essentially every bike ride I've ever done.
Well, that brings us quite neatly on to the next question, which is really, can you give a rundown of the different routes that you have cycled in the Americas and elsewhere?
Yes, absolutely. So my first big one, I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Honduras for 2 years, and that's a program in the United States where they send volunteers all over the world to work in developing countries and help them out in some way. So I lived in Honduras, and I thought the best way to get home after 2 years would be to ride my bike, so I could really process what I had done. I had worked with kids in schools, and it was an amazing experience. And I didn't want to just get on an airplane and be home in a matter of 5 hours. I thought that would just be too fast and reverse culture shock. I wanted to go slow and really just take it all in. So that was my first one, Honduras to my hometown of Boulder, Colorado. I've ridden my bike across the United States 3 different times, 3 different routes. I've ridden down both the east and the west coast of the United States. I've ridden across Cuba. I've ridden down the Baja Peninsula in Mexico and a couple other little rides here and there.
So obviously the reason why you presumably do a lot of these rides is because you're American and you're based in America. But
Yeah.
what makes them so fantastic?
Well, we have an amazing amount of just outdoor space, which is just not populated at all. I mean, I love Europe, but Europe is pretty densely populated, and bike touring in Europe's a different thing. It's more of a cultural thing. In the United States, you can ride your bike for hundreds of miles and not see another human. And I really love our wild places, through the national parks. And that's really the gem of this country is the landscapes from the desert Southwest to the rainforest up in Washington in the Northwest to the tropical areas in Florida. And it's just a fascinating place to ride a bike. And for me personally, I didn't grow up traveling at all, like zero. And so it's a good way for me to get to know my own country.
So if I were to come to you and say, right, Ryan, I'm coming to America, I'm going to bring my bike, pick out your top route in the Americas. Where should I start? Where should I finish? What should I make sure I don't avoid? And perhaps alternatively, which bit should I avoid? What are your top tips for that first route?
That's a tough one. And I've met lots of people from around the world when I've done my cross country bike rides. I think that's like the stereotypical, Route 66 riding through cowboy country and through the Midwest. And that's pretty special. Riding across America is really neat. But although I would say the most naturally beautiful ride is down the West Coast, down Washington, Oregon, California. You have such a variety. The redwood trees, those giant trees. You can ride right through those bad boys, and along the coast and the ocean. And so I'd say the West Coast is the most beautiful. But if you want a little bit of Americana that you see in the movies, a cross-country ride's going to give you that when you're going through places like middle of nowhere, Arizona, and Nebraska, and Kansas, and West Virginia, and all that kind of stuff.
And these routes that you're talking about, here in Europe, where, we've got lots of routes that people can follow. They're often signposted. They're well documented online. You can buy books, you can buy maps, etc. Does that same kind of on the ground and perhaps online infrastructure exist in America as well?
Absolutely. We have a organization called the Adventure Cycling, just Adventure Cycling. And they have a lot of routes, that go up and down and crisscross and circle all over parts of the United States. And they provide maps and guidebooks and stuff like that. So that's really when people ask me, where to start, I always send them to the Adventure Cycling website.
And are these routes, do they bother to signpost them, or are you expected just to find your own way? And
some of them are signposted here and there. There's one down the Mississippi corridor that has some signs every now and then to let you know you're on the right path. But for the most part, you're on your own.
Because in the recent videos I've been watching, because you've just this summer been cycling along the Great Divide, which is not too far, I think, from where you're based. For that, you were following a GPS track, yeah?
Exactly, yes. And that route's been around for over 20 years. It was established in 1998 as the longest off-road bike route in the world. And I just download a GPS and follow the little, line on my bike computer, and it's pretty easy. And this is all new to me. I haven't had a bike computer till this January. Before, I would just use my phone or use paper maps like the old days. But these bike computers are pretty incredible these days.
I watched all of those. I think there are currently 5, 6 videos that you make. You're continuing to make them, aren't you, about that
Yep.
journey? It's really only just started. But one thing that particularly intrigues me, because quite frankly, we don't really have any animals in Europe that can probably kill you. But in North America, like many other places around the world, you do have things that could potentially kill you.
Yeah.
I would be terrified of camping anywhere near a place where there could be bears, for example. Can you just talk about what you can do to prevent that and how you can stay alive?
Exactly. Well, I'm alive, so I've done a good job at staying alive. I would say, in Montana is grizzly country, so they're not just bears; they are big bears, the biggest. And yeah, everywhere that travels in the back country there is, advised to bring bear spray, which, I guess if you getting a little tiff with the bear, you spray him with some pepper spray and he runs off. I have no idea if it really works. I luckily didn't really see any bears. I heard one once scampering off the road and I could see them running into the woods. But for the most part, they're afraid of humans. They hear humans coming and they don't attack. So I've been, I live in Colorado where we have mountain lions and bears and rattlesnakes, and I've never had a problem with any type of wild animal. And this is a question I get on a lot of my YouTube videos is like, what do you do to stay safe? And the things you can do is, hang your food in a tree away from you and have bear spray. And then, you can make a lot of noise. So, they get scared of you. But, I don't really have a great answer for staying safe other than maybe I'm a little bit lucky and probably most animals are just scared of humans anyway.
Yeah, I'd take my hat off to you because I quite frankly, I would be absolutely terrified. I was planning this summer to go to Japan, and
Oh,
Japan also has an issue with bears. In my mind, I think, well, the Japanese they're nice, placid people. The bears in Japan are probably fairly similar, but I tend to think of America, and I think the fact that you all carry guns, and it can be a tricky place to visit. I would imagine if you go to certain areas, and there's something in me which says that the bears are probably a bit similar.
yeah, for sure. The bears here carry guns for sure. I would say, yeah, you're more likely to get hit by a car than you are, to get attacked by a bear. And that's the appeal of something like the Great Divide route is that you're on a lot of back roads without much traffic. Because as we know, humans all over the world are on their cell phones all the time, especially even when they're driving, and distracted driving is becoming a really big danger to cyclists. I think the rules in Europe are a lot more strict than they are here, but I don't trust humans anymore in cars.
I think that's probably a really valid point that humans in cars are far more lethal than bears wandering around a forest just looking for something else to eat apart from you. Now, just going back to those videos about the Great Divide. Currently, I think you've got to, is it number 5? And you haven't actually made that much progress in terms of the overall journey. You get to these places where the small settlement that you get to really goes out of its way to cater for touring cyclists. And that is something, is that just in southern Montana or is that quite widespread across America?
I've found it everywhere I've ever traveled, and I call it road magic. And it's when you find these people that are just looking out for other humans. And I've met them in West Virginia, in Missouri, and a lot of places along the Great Divide. Again, the Great Divide has been around for 20 years, and it's a very established route. So people are used to seeing bikes, going down these exact roads every summer. Maybe 1,000 people a summer do it. On some of my other rides across the country, it's not an established route a lot of times. I'm just taking advice from the locals and just going wherever. And so they're not always used to seeing bikes because it's not like, you know, everybody does it. But I would say, yeah, the hospitality is pretty incredible. And again, that's my favorite part of riding bikes is meeting wonderful people.
Yeah, I think in Europe and probably more generally around the world, we tend to get a very skewed image of America
Oh
because
yeah.
of what we see on the news. We see Trump, we see the right wing, we see quite a lot of violence. But actually, that's probably not a very accurate representative image of what America really is.
Yeah, and it's really unfortunate. And I mean, the United States right now is just so crazy in so many different ways. And one of the reasons why I like going on these bike rides and sharing the stories with the world is to do just that, is to show another side of my country that you're not seeing in the news. I get emails from people from Australia and England and Asia saying, wow, what you're showing us is way different than what we're seeing on the news, and it makes me want to come visit your country. So I kind of look at myself as a biking ambassador of the United States in some ways, where, yeah, there's some horrible people doing horrible things and they get all the attention on the news, but for the most part, 99% of Americans are very cool.
If anybody doubts that, then I would encourage them to go and watch some of your videos, because the people you meet are, very nice, very genuine, very welcoming. Those people who go out of their way to, they create accommodation space, and they don't necessarily look for money for doing it.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're running a cafe, and it's good for them to get some local money some money into the local economy by passing cyclists. But actually, they're doing it out of the good of their heart, really.
Yeah, and small town America, people just look out for one another. Farmers and people that don't always have a lot of money, but they're very generous. And so I've found that in the small towns, you're much more likely to find road magic or an encounter with a really nice person than you would if you're going through a city in the United States. Small town people really look out for one another.
Just to touch briefly on perhaps the cycling that you've done outside of America, have you? I know you've been to Europe because you spent was it a year living in Sweden?
Yep.
What kind of cycling have you done elsewhere?
Well, I really had hoped to ride Land's End to John O'Groats this summer, but they wouldn't let us in for good reason. So that was what I was supposed to do. I wasn't planning on doing the Great Divide this summer. I was fully planning on riding the length of Great Britain. So that is one that I really want to do. Yes, I lived in Sweden. I've done some cycling around there, but I really haven't done a ton. I've ridden my bike around Tuscany and Italy a little bit, going to wineries, but it's something that I want to do more of.
You talked earlier about the fact that you can cycle for hours and hours and hours in America, and you're still in the middle of a forest, or you're still in the middle of the mountains. And it's true that that's not really something that you can do very often in Europe. I was cycling along the coast of Norway a few years ago, and I expected it to be far more remote than it actually was. But I never went for a day without passing a fully stocked shop to buy food. There were campsites, there were hotels. It never actually felt remote. In fact, I was never out of distance of a 4G signal for my mobile phone. It's actually quite difficult to get to remote areas in Europe.
Yeah, for sure. One of my other dream routes is I want to ride the length of Sweden from the very bottom to the very, very top. And I think, north of Stockholm, it would be pretty remote. So I'm looking forward to that.
Good luck when you hopefully get to Britain and do the land
Yeah.
end to John O'Groats. It's I've never done it myself, but it's it's very, very popular,
Yeah.
and I think it's got some challenges, especially in Cornwall, which is surprisingly hilly, I think.
Okay. Yeah.
So watch out for that. Just to move on to your films themselves, I carry my mobile phone, my iPhone, and it's capable of taking some pretty good quality footage in terms of the technical quality, 4K video, good sound, etc. But you take it to another level. Can you just explain the logistics of actually making your films?
Yes, it's a lot of work for sure. So I usually on any bike ride have three different cameras. I have a drone for the aerial shots, and I love showing the audience just the landscape from way above. It just gives you an idea of what I'm riding through. And then I usually bring a bigger camera that has, really good image sensor on it and the ability to have a shotgun microphone, so the audio is always good. And then I have some sort of a small action camera like a GoPro for that I put on my helmet and stuff. So during the day, yeah, I'm filming with three different cameras. I'm stopping, I'm setting up a tripod, I'm riding past the tripod over and over and over and over, pulling out the drone so I can have enough footage to then go back home and edit something that looks, like a camera crew is with me. but there
Yeah,
is no camera crew. It's just me.
yeah. And in terms of the amount of time every day, for example, that you have to devote to that kind of thing, how many extra hours are you in effect doing that over and above of the cycling?
Yeah.
How much extra time do you have to kind of factor into the trip?
Yeah, I guess it depends on the day, but I would say an hour to an hour and a half extra of pulling out the camera, setting up tripods, flying the drone, taking it out, packing it up over and over. And there's always technical difficulties in charging batteries and memory cards and all the other stuff. So yeah, it's difficult. It really is. But I love doing it. And it's the only way for me to share these stories in the way that I want to do it.
Right, just going back to the drone thing, how do you, if you're traveling by yourself, you've got some fantastic drone footage where the camera is very high and it shows you cycling off down a road, down a dirt track or wherever, and you're getting fantastic pictures from the drone, but presumably there's nobody else involved. How do you actually operate the drone in those conditions?
I get this question a lot and it makes me smile. So what I'm doing is the drone controller looks like a video game controller, and you connect your phone to it so you can see what the drone is seeing. And so I'll put the drone up in the air and get the shot essentially, set to where I want it. And then I'll just start riding my bike with the controller in my hand and slowly moving the drone up in the air as I pedal. So it's multitasking at its finest. I pedal and drone at the same time, and people always ask if it's dangerous. It's not too dangerous if you're on a road without cars, but I've gotten myself into a couple situations where I've either crashed the drone or crashed myself.
Well, tell us about one of those occasions where I was going to ask you, you must have had some minor disasters with the drone.
Oh, for sure. Let's say I'm riding, I remember once in New York, I was flying near a bunch of trees and the shot was amazing, and I'm pedaling and flying the drone. It's recording. I'm really excited. I'm looking at the screen, not, what's in front of me on my bike. I'm looking at the drone and what the drone is seeing, and I just wasn't paying attention and just, crashed. And then I crashed the drone into a tree and it bounced down like it was a pinball. And luckily the drone didn't break. The drones are pretty tough these days.
Well, it sounds as though the drones are more dangerous than the bears that you find in northern Northwest America.
Yeah, well, and the
Um,
drones might be a good bear repellent. I'm sure it scares them.
yeah. Good thinking. In terms of the filming again, are there any things that you've actually not filmed that afterwards you think, ah, damn, I really wish I'd got my camera out and filmed that?
Yeah, good question. It's hard to always be filming and to anticipate something that should be filmed. And usually it's interactions with other humans I come across, and it's just an awkward thing to meet somebody right away and whip out a camera because they're going to be like, "Whoa, why is this guy filming me?" But you really want to get those genuine exciting moments when you first meet somebody. And so there's some times where I wish I had a camera crew, where you're like, if I had a documentary crew with me, they'd be getting all these moments that I'm not getting because I'm focused, first of all, on riding my bike. Like that's goal number one. Goal number two is documenting it. And it's a tricky balance between being present in the moment and not letting the camera take me out of being present. And there's been a few times, yeah, I would say interactions with humans that I just didn't capture because it didn't feel comfortable. Um, but I have plenty of other interactions that are great, and what the audience, doesn't see, they don't know that I missed it. Only I'm the only one that knows that it was missed.
Yeah, true. Have you ever gone back and tried to recreate something in a kind of a false way? An encounter, you've gone back and you said to the people, "Hey, I'm going to go back. That was fantastic, but I'm going to go back. I'm going to ride into town again. Imagine you've never seen me before."
It's hard. I've worked in the TV world for so long, and when you're asking random strangers to, because then they're acting, and when you're asking people to like act excited, it just doesn't come off as natural. So I don't really do that. What I will do sometimes is I'll meet somebody, chat with them for a half an hour, and then say, "Hey, you know what? I'm making a whole documentary series of this ride. Would you mind having this conversation essentially again so I can share it with the world. And then I'll ask them some of the same questions. Tell me about your town, or what's so unique about this place. And, for example, in episode 4 or 5, when I meet those people on the Great Divide, I talked with them for a long time before I pulled out the camera.
Yeah, and they are genuine interviews. Well, they're not even interviews; they're conversations. They're genuine interactions, and they talk in a very honest way. So you've done a fantastic job trying to and managing to get them to talk in a very comfortable, in a very eloquent way.
Yeah, thanks. It's a trick for sure, and that's the biggest thing, is making them feel comfortable with you. And if they're comfortable, then they're just going to talk like they're having a normal conversation. And that's usually how I go into all these encounters. I'm like, okay, I know there's a camera here and it's a little awkward, but pay no attention to it. Just talk with me and we're going to be all good.
What advice would you give to somebody who was heading off and they wanted to make their own video, high quality video for a bike ride that they were about to go on? What key bits of advice would you give?
I always tell people, because it's really easy to film the good times when you're happy and psyched, but when you're hurting or it's hard or the weather's bad, it's just taking out a camera is just a pain in the butt sometimes. But those are the moments that are the most interesting by far. And in a lot of my videos, I will talk straight to the camera when I'm having a really hard time or I'm getting emotional or whatever it is. And that's what really, I would say, the viewers like the most, because they see that you're a real human. You're not just always whooping and hollering and psyched and on top of the world, like, oh, this guy actually has some hard days and some tough times, and I can relate to this human. Otherwise, if you're just showing all the good times, then you're essentially like a superhero, and it's just not very real. So I would always tell people to film the hard parts, and then, in general, just take the effort. It's a lot of effort to do this, and just, yes, it is a pain in the butt to set up the tripod over and over and over and over, but those shots really help tell the story.
And yeah, I know from my own experience, it's far easier to film too much than too little, because it's very frustrating when you sit down and try and edit something and you think, oh, I don't have that bit of film that I really would make this story complete.
Yep, I always tell people, if you don't film it, it never happened. Because you can make a video and pull out a camera after, let's say, a lightning storm or whatever, and tell the audience about this horrible lightning storm. But it's not as powerful as if you are filming in the lightning storm and the thunder's crashing and it's showing you being terrified. That's what the audience wants to see. They don't want to see like a diary recap after the fact.
Now, there are some other videos on your site which are, again, very, very interesting, but they're not directly to do with cycling or traveling. One in particular is one that's quite recent, I think. I think you made it earlier this summer, and that was about your decision to quit drinking alcohol, and you were celebrating your 5th anniversary of being dry. Can you talk about how that impacted in a positive way on your cycling, on your life, and your career?
Absolutely. I always tell people that quitting alcohol was the best decision I ever made. It's very rare in life where you can make a decision that has only positive results. And that was definitely what happened after I quit drinking. And it's been beneficial in every way. I'm much more present with every conversation now, with every human I meet. I'm not spending lots of money on alcohol. I'm not waking up hungover. I have a lot more time now to focus on other things like editing and creating. It's been something that I didn't know would be as big of a gift as it is. And it really is one of the biggest gifts I've ever given myself. And it sounds kind of silly. And also, I still have just as much fun as before. I used to love drinking and partying and having a good time, but I can still go out and have a good time and interact with humans. And then I go home and I wake up and I remember it all, and it's great.
Yeah, I think one of the things I would struggle with if I decided to quit alcohol, in terms of the cycling, it is such a nice thing to get at the end of the day. Perhaps you're cycling in a hot place and you get to your destination, you pitch your tent, and there's a nice little bar. I'm kind of, in my mind, I'm just thinking of somewhere in Provence or somewhere in the south of France, and you think, I'm just going to finish off the day with a nice cold beer. Is that something that you miss?
I don't miss alcohol. I get that question a lot too. And I can still I can still go to a bar and hang out with people. I'll just drink water and chat. But yeah, the idea of, a beer after a long bike ride is kind of fun, but I don't miss it. Like, life is just so much better without it that I don't miss it. But I do understand why people love it. And most people drink responsibly. They have one or two beers, and that just wasn't who I was. I usually took it overboard more often than not. And so the best way for me to prevent all the nonsense was just completely quit.
Yeah, and again, just as with the other videos, I'd recommend that people go and watch that video, because it's a really interesting reflection upon the reasons. You expand on really what you've just been talking about, but it's a really interesting listen, and if it helps anybody, then brilliant.
That's the thing, is I get emails all the time from people who watch that video or any of my other videos saying, oh, I stopped drinking alcohol and I found your video and it really helped encourage me, or your videos have really helped me get cycling more. I pulled the bike out of the garage for the first time in 15 years and I'm spending more time with my family and I've lost 20 pounds. That's how I get paid. You don't make a lot of money as a YouTuber, but those moments when somebody reaches out and tells me that I've inspired them, those are my emotional paychecks. That's what it's all about. And I love it. I absolutely love being able to not only make these videos and share the stories, but then interact with people through comments on YouTube or people emailing me.
So what's coming next? What's the next place that you're going to conquer on your bike?
I don't know. I'm going to be editing for a long time, all this Great Divide footage. And I actually didn't get to finish the ride. Here's a spoiler, because I couldn't get into New Mexico. New Mexico had very strict quarantine rules at the time. And so I couldn't get in there. So I still have 700 miles to do to finish the divide. So I'd like to go do that, hopefully this fall. But if that doesn't happen, I really, really hope that Europe opens up to us Americans again. I really want to go to Great Britain next summer and do Land's End. I'd also like to ride the length of Sweden next year if possible. So I'm always dreaming up something new, and we'll see how it all shapes out.
And in terms of the kind of the Ryan Van Duzer brand, are you going to develop that beyond the YouTube channel, beyond the website?
Yes, I plan to make an amusement park with roller coasters and all sorts of fun things called Duzerland. Yeah. I would like to make t-shirts and stuff with some of my more popular slogans that people seem to like, the ole, 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 all that kind of stuff. So some t-shirts, but I don't want to turn my channel into a big store. I don't want to be selling people too much stuff. I want to create stories that inspire, and if I can do that for a long time, I'll be pretty happy with that.
Now, there is somebody who appears in your videos, albeit kind of vicariously, and she's frequently mentioned, and that is your mother. And you admit in your fun facts on your website, you admit, I'm a mama's boy.
Yes.
She's an important woman in your life, obviously.
Absolutely. She essentially raised all four of us. I have two brothers and a sister on her own, and she's one of those moms. We all have amazing moms. Well, most of us have amazing moms, but she's one of those moms that just, without her, life would have been much harder, without the work that she put into sacrificing for us as a single mom. And so she struggled making ends meet growing up with all the kids, and now that I'm older and I have free time and a little bit more money, I like to spoil my mom. So I've taken her on some trips. She actually did a bike trip with me once across the state of Iowa, and that was very exciting. So yeah, my mom is very, very important to me.
And another one of your fun facts is all about eating termites. Tell me about that.
So I was on a reality show on the Discovery Channel where they dropped 9 of us into the jungles of Venezuela, and we had 30 days to find civilization. And we had no supplies or anything. It's very similar to the survival shows that are out today. This was one of the first ones. And yeah, a lot of days we ate termites to get a little bit of protein, and they are gross.
That's that. We have a program in Britain called "I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here."
Oh,
And
yes.
have you seen that?
I have seen pieces of that on YouTube.
I would imagine the Discovery Channel wouldn't be seen dead showing "I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here," but they do kind of these mock events where they have to survive, but it's not really survival when they're surrounded by TV cameras. When you do things like that, is there really any peril involved?
I mean, they probably wouldn't let you die. But for example, on our show, I mean, I went 30 days in the jungle where we barely ate any food. Like when I'm talking, we were eating termites. We were eating termites. We were eating grub worms, anything to stay alive. I lost over 35 pounds. It was a very, very difficult experience. By far harder than any bike ride, the hardest bike ride I've ever been on. And starvation really took a toll. And then you're not sleeping at night because we didn't have tents or sleeping bags or anything to make it comfortable. We're getting rained on all night. Bugs are biting us, mosquitoes constantly. So yeah, it was very, very hard, both mentally and physically. But yeah, the camera crew, if they saw that you were going to walk off a cliff, they probably would have intervened.
Well, yeah, I was going to say you're being followed by a camera crew. Presumably, what they're they're living well. They're eating proper food. They're staying in hotels and tents and what have you.
Yeah, so they weren't ever allowed to eat in front of us. So we never saw them eating, and they did that out of respect. And every night they camped about a mile away from us. And yeah, they were having barbecues. They were eating, they had to do a job. They were carrying giant cameras around the jungle documenting us. So they needed to be well fed. But yeah, no, they never, they didn't make it comfortable for us. That's for sure.
Yeah, because one of your other fun facts is that I love burritos.
Yeah.
There's a long way from eating termites to eating burritos.
Oh man, when I was in the jungle, I have never dreamed so much about food. Every night, I was just dreaming about like the grossest food you could ever imagine, just piles of ice cream and cookies and all the good things because my body was starving for every type of nutrition. And when you don't eat for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 30 days, you really, really start breaking down both mentally and physically. It got to the point where walking for 10 feet was difficult. Like you feel out of breath, you feel lightheaded, you almost feel like you're drunk in a way because things are spinning and nothing makes sense. Tying a knot is difficult. It was really a bizarre feeling, starvation.
Yeah, in fact, that reminds me that in these recent videos about cycling the Great Divide, you meet and you spend a bit of time with a Canadian chap, and he's
Yeah.
really good when it comes to cooking, and he brings his stove, and you make the comment at some point about actually you're not the greatest of cooks, and you don't bring your own stuff, you don't cook stuff, you kind of looks like you more perhaps buy stuff from the shops when you pass them and eat them as you go along. Is that a fair representation?
Yeah, for sure. I've never actually bike toured with a stove. I don't drink coffee, and I'll buy cans of beans and tortillas and make burritos. And you don't have to heat them up; they taste fine cold. And yeah, I eat a lot of things that don't need to be cooked. So, nuts and beans and tortillas and cheese and when I can, fruits, and then lots of energy bars and stuff like that.
The final question. I work with kids. I'm a teacher. I meet kids in schools and I talk to them, and they have aspirations, whether it to become a sports person or a film star, which are, they're very laudable things. But in the back of your mind, you're thinking, actually, realistically, you're probably going to end up working in an office. If one of those children were to come to you and say, I want to become something like Ryan Van Duzer, I want a career where adventure is my life and adventure is my job, would you encourage them to do it? And what advice would you give to them?
This is a great question, and I love it. I do go to schools a lot and do presentations about this to young people in my town and beyond. And I would tell them and I get emails from young people like, "Oh man, I want to do what you're doing when I grow up." And I say, "Yeah, go for it." I grew up in a household we didn't have a lot of money. I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth. I didn't have all the connections. Everything that I've gotten in life, I've really hustled for. And I think most people on the planet can follow their dreams to a point where they can make them come true. There's obviously some circumstances where you're just stuck in adverse poverty forever, but I would tell people to stick with it. And for me, the thing I always tell these groups of students is that you just have to be relentless. You have to really, really just go at it and believe in it and keep on going and going and going, because it's not easy, and you're not going to make a lot of money at the beginning of your journey. Like I did, I got started on public access TV doing this stuff, living in my mom's basement. And it's one of those things where I've just stuck with it. And even now, I have a YouTube channel that's fairly successful, but I'm 41 years old, and it's taken essentially a lifetime to get to this point. And but it is fun, and it's really rewarding, and I wouldn't want to be doing anything else. So being relentless in what you love is what I tell young people. If they really want to make it happen, you have to stick with it. And if you get to a point and you're getting some failure, or you're not feeling like you can keep moving on, that's really when you need to dig deep and keep going. Because it is easy to bail. It's like, oh, I've tried this for 2 years and it's just not working out. It's not for me. I'm going to go get the office job. I mean, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. But I do believe that if you keep at it, it will slowly formulate and become quite a nice reality.
Yeah, and I think people listening to this, and people who haven't seen your videos, people who know nothing about you, you immediately exude optimism. And on the front page, on the homepage of your website, there's an excellent quote by, well, it says Jim Henson, also known as Kermit the Frog. I presume it's Jim Henson talking rather than Kermit, but either way. And the quote is, "I know I drive some people crazy with what seems to be ridiculous optimism, but it has always worked for me." And that's certainly the case for you.
Absolutely. I love that quote. I love Jim Henson. And the Muppets, I think you have the Muppets over there. But yeah, they're just a bunch of like goofballs that are super positive. And not that like the Muppets are my heroes, but I do. I mean, relentless optimism has gotten me to where I am. And of course, I'm human. I have bad days. I can get a little depressed. I can be grumpy and angry. And I go through all the emotions of anybody else. But I do look on the bright side of most situations. Even when things really suck, you're starving in a jungle, or you're not getting the jobs that you thought you'd get, or you're not making as much money as you thought you'd be making, or you don't have the girlfriend or the boyfriend. There's so many things to complain about in life, but there's so much more to be grateful for. And it's all about gratitude.
So I suppose the moral of the story, the message of this entire interview could be summed up by be a Muppet.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. Follow them, and they will lead you to the utmost reaches of success.
Yeah, excellent. Well, on that point, thank you for talking to me today. I think it's been a fantastic conversation. Your optimism is infectious, and I shall go back to work tomorrow with renewed optimism for life.
Good. I love it. And if you ever want me to pop into your class and talk to kids, I love doing it for any reason.
Well, when you're doing your Land's End to John O'Groats next year, get in touch. And you never know. I'm sure loads of schools in Britain would love to hear from you, because I think you've got a fantastic story to tell.
Good. Thank you very much. This was really, really fun, and I appreciate being part of this.